Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akisanya Femi Femu. Oh, come on, man.
Good morning. I know. I like it. Probably put it on my passport. Add that to my name.
Femi Femu. Oh, come on.
That's me. That's me. It is. Don't let my siblings see.
That'll be too long for your passport. So.
You sure?
Yes.
There's plenty names on there, to be honest.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing?
Good morning, Adefemi. The most demure.
Han, stop. It's giving very demure with the neckerchief. Yes. And Ayo too with the brooch. Yeah. Classy ladies. I mean, goodness. Alrighty, let me tell you what's happening around the world. Ghana's Office of the Special Prosecutor has declared former Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta a fugitive, placing him on its wanted list for failing to appear for questioning on multiple corruption investigations. This dramatic turn of events comes amid the John Mahama government's renewed anti-corruption campaign dubbed Operation Recover All Loot. Now, the Finance Minister, who served from 2017 to early 2024 under the administration of his cousin, the former president, Nana Akufo-Addo, is implicated in a multiple accusations of high-profile corruption and in these investigations. Now, these include contracts aimed at improving revenue assurance in the petroleum and mineral sector, a network improvement project in the electricity sector, the procurement of Mercedes-Benz Sprinter ambulances, and financial irregularities in the procurement process, and contracts related to the National Cathedral product, which was initiated by the former President Akufo-Addo. Now, the OSP, which is the Office of the Special Prosecutor, says despite multiple invitations, Ofori-Atta has evaded questioning, prompting his official designation as a fugitive. Now, his legal team, however, claims that he is indefinitely out of the country for medical reasons. Now, this case is shaping up to be a litmus test for Ghana's fight against corruption. If Ofori-Atta is successfully brought before investigators, it could set a precedent for other high-profile corruption cases. However, if he does remain abroad indefinitely, it may fuel suspicions of a political bias or selective justice in the Mahama government's anti-graft drive. So very interesting times ahead for Ghana when it comes to this anti-corruption drive. Moving over to the United States. And Donald Trump says that he and Vladimir Putin have agreed to begin negotiations to broker a ceasefire in Ukraine. As the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, says Ukraine would have to cede territory and reject NATO membership in order to reach a deal. Now, the negotiations with Russia and others openly demands that Ukraine concedes land. Now, that's going to be of concern to Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. This move clearly signals his European allies that the Trump administration will offer minimal resistance to Putin's demand in order to cut a deal as quickly as possible. Donald Trump has long promised to quickly end the war in Ukraine, although he has not specified how he plans to achieve this goal. Now, this conflict in Ukraine has been ongoing since 2022, resulting in thousands of deaths and widespread displacement. So yet again, we see the US president involving himself in international conflicts. And I do think that it is, one of my favorite words, is interesting to see the route he's taking in trying to broker a ceasefire. I think that one thing we're seeing with the Middle East and now with Ukraine and Russia is that it just seems as though he tends to take a side and then use what that person is calling for to push the other person to relent. And I just don't think that's the best way to mediate an issue. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a very complex issue when it comes to Ukraine, especially with the demands around NATO, because we know that that's the foundation of this issue, really, is the fact that Russia didn't want a NATO base in its backyard, so to speak. But of course, since then, so many things have evolved. One of the things that we often don't talk about is the fact that Zelensky's mandate has actually expired. It's run out. Yes, fine, they're in a state of martial law and a state of war, so they can't technically go to election, but his presidential term has expired. And when you read reports from the other side, you do read of Ukrainians who are saying that they're kind of tired of this man and they'd like an opportunity to vote for a new leader who can maybe have a new approach to the crisis. So I think that's also an interesting angle that we often don't tap into, is the fact that Ukrainians themselves are kind of starting to feel a bit exhausted with Zelensky's leadership style. Now, very quickly to Ghana. So on the allegations of the finance around the former finance minister, there were reports that his home was raided last night, or was it 2 nights ago? Now the office of the special prosecutor has come out to say that that raid was staged. He said that the special prosecutor, if we're the ones who raided it, you would know that it's us. Apparently, his home was raided by men in military uniform, and the special prosecutor is saying, no, we don't play those games. If it was us, you would know that it was us. And so he's alleging that this former finance minister has, staged and put up a show to make it seem as though he's, he's being witch hunted, being persecuted, and so forth. And it's just so funny, because I just say to myself, African playbook is always the same. Doesn't matter where you are. But if he truly is unwell, wherever he is, I wish him a speedy recovery so that he can come back to Ghana and face the allegations. Yeah.
A lot of things, that we share across the African continent. Yes. Unfortunately, some of them not very good. If you read the Ghanaian story, this Ofori-Atta story, and close your eyes, or you don't see the name of the country, it could be any country on the African continent, and that is so sad. And one of the things that this highlights is our push for strong institutions, because part of the allegations is that in one of the contract procurement with an oil company, due process wasn't followed. They didn't, the procurement agency wasn't carried along, and so they just spent money without following due process. Don't we hear that often in other parts? So beyond just then targeting these people, especially when a new government comes into power, it is more speak around strong institutions to ensure that they don't even have the platform or the opportunity to carry such acts without following due process. Another test of this government's, fight against corruption would be for President Mahama to prosecute his own people. What some people have said is that he's targeting the opposition. Yes. His own people have also been accused of corruption, and some of the cases aren't being pursued. So to really see that he wants to fight and not just targeting opposition, even though in cases like this where some of the guilty ones are brought to book, it doesn't really matter. It's important for him to also demonstrate that by making sure that he's stamping out corruption across all levels, whether it's with his cronies or with his foes. Again, remember earlier this week, I'd also talked about how he had said that he wanted to cut cost of governance by ensuring that his ministers will no longer fly first class, and any travel that had to happen must be approved. Good moves. But this is what usually happens when a new president, a new sheriff in town begins to blow on all cylinders. Let's hope this is sustained, and let's hope that this fight is not just what we call in Nigeria as initial gra-gra, but is able to carry and follow it through. With regards to Ofori-Atta being ill, he said he was going for medical attention in January, and it looks like it's protracted illness. It doesn't want to end. And it's the same thing. On this side of the divide as well, oftentimes the reason why they don't appear in court or before an investigation panel is as a result of ill health. Haven't we seen people who came to the House, the National Assembly, faint or pass out or come because they've been investigated, and usually that's the end of the story. We don't hear much of it again. So let's hope that this will be different. With regards to Ukraine and Russia and what President Trump is doing, it's a different stance from President Joe Biden. When Joe Biden was in office, he wouldn't have had a conversation with Putin. In fact, he had called him murderous. He said he had closed that conversation channel with him. So it looks like President Trump is towing a different line. However, the UK, through its Defense Secretary, John Haley, has come out to say that there will be no talk around resolving the conflict between Russia and Ukraine without Ukraine being on the table, or with Ukraine having a say in this. And it's alluding to the fact that Trump called Putin and has said he's willing to work with Putin, even said he's looking forward to them visiting each other. But there are no talks around, and said he'll get to try and reach a deal. But there are no talks as such with Zelensky from Ukraine, and the UK is saying no. They want to ensure that Kiev is in a good place to negotiate their power. They've supported them all these years. To abandon them at this point would be, tantamount to them going back on their foreign policy or their direction. So it's just interesting to see how two leaders can approach the same issue in different ways, where one has Putin was almost in the naughty corner. No one was speaking to him. Correct. There were sanctions against Russia, but Trump is coming in with a different approach, whereby he's opening the lines of conversation, and it looks like they're on friendly terms. Let's see how this will play out.
Let's see.
A couple of things. Number one, in all fairness, Ofori-Atta is not well. In fact, even when he was finance minister, There were always constant squabbles about him going out of the country, and he's been unwell. So if he says he's going for a medical checkup, in all fairness, it's not well. I know what you are talking about, the script being played by Africa. I mean, we saw Professor Ponde faint on television and all of that, the fainting spell, but in all fairness, it's not well. Also, the point about fighting corruption, yes, there were a lot of things that Nana Akufo-Addo did do that should be reviewed. We cannot forget the fact that Nana Akufo-Addo did ruin this economy. And you remember the ties Okorie-Afe has with Nana Akufo-Addo. And that's why a lot of people are even saying in Ghana, if they can go after him, it will score a big political point for Mahama. There were a lot of things that did do. Plummeting of the economy, going back to the World Bank, getting a lot of loans, a lot of contract kickback and everything. I don't even think, in all fairness, that Mahama has started. If Mahama decides to probe COVID contracts in Ghana, like they say in Yoruba parlance, Femi, do you know what they call Begede Agbino?
Tell me.
All hell will be let loose.
Oh.
That's just it. So, apart from this Sprinter, Mercedes Sprinter contracts and everything and all that, yeah, you can make a case for the high-handedness for the raid and all of that, which is always the case, which looks like Nigeria, which we do not support. But it doesn't mean that, corruption should be swept over the carpet. And also, within his cabinet, he too should look at people that have been touted for corruption. Sure. And he should do the needful as regards them. But I think well on this, yes, there's a strong point to be able to probe these people. As regards Russia, the main reason why Russia invaded Ukraine was because Putin feels ancestrally they own the land. Putin also enunciated this in a 5,000-word article. You can also go ahead to read Masha Grasha's book on Putin. When Putin was a KGB officer when the war did fall in the 80s, in the late 80s, to show you that Putin has always wanted that big Russia confederacy. The next question I'm sure you will ask me is, why didn't he do it all this while? He didn't do it all this while because most of the leaders of Ukraine were always puppets to him one way or the other, from the likes of Viktor Yushchenko and the likes. Just like he has the Belarusian leader in his pockets. Americans allowed him continue with this reign of madness. They didn't do anything. In fact, Obama started something called the Russian Reset, when he took Crimea, he took Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and even got into the Donbass region. The first person, which kudos to me, I not like Biden for a lot of things, but the first person that said enough of all this madness was Biden. The Republican rights are saying, yes, there was a lot of corruption. The money that even funneled to Ukraine was only $77 billion that was paid out of it. But it stopped Putin's move. What Trump has done on this telephone conversation is, Putin, name your price, will give you territories in Ukraine. And that's sad. And that's why I keep saying, it's either Trump starts the Third World War or embolden the people to start the Third. And I'll tell you how it's going to embolden people to start the Third World War. If you make territories and you concede territories, plus the one they've already gotten, you've probably divided Ukraine. And when you divide Ukraine, you have a form of disgruntled people. In his article, he argued that most of the Ukrainian are Russian-speaking people because of their ancestry and all of that. Yes, but you've alienated some people. In the end, you will have made this war all in vain. So what was the essence of wasting American tax money to fight this war? To be able to stem the tide. Yeah. This war has also shown that Putin's army is not as strong as it is, and Putin is not as strong as it is. He had to rely on Prigozhin to help him fight, and the North Korean soldiers. And Russia have not made that great advancement any longer. Yeah. But what you are telling him is, take what you want. I'll tell you what it reminds me of. It reminds me of the 1930s during the Hitler War, when I think it was Chamberlain that said, give Hitler what he wants with Sudetenland, he will not fight us any longer. And it proved to be wrong. And that's why when Winston Churchill decided to fight him, he made that famous quote. He said, who is an appeaser? He said, an appeaser is somebody that gives the crocodile meat, hoping it will eat him last. If America goes on this appeasement with Russia, Putin will ask for more.
Well, let's see. Let's wait and see. Let's move on now to our newspaper headlines across the globe. Let's actually look at the front cover of This Day this morning. And This Day, as you've already mentioned at the top of the show, reports on this ongoing disarray within the People's Democratic Party. Now, the party's National Working Committee yesterday affirmed Sunday Ude Okoye as its national secretary, saying the party is bound by the appeal court judgment on the matter. Meanwhile, still staying on the front page of this state, the NLC is actually threatened to shut down the telecom sector on the 1st of March over this 50% tariff hike. Now, the NLC declaration of war on telcos is the lead story on today's edition of the New Telegraph. The Nigeria Labour Congress has drawn the battle line, urging Nigerian workers and other willing citizens to boycott services of MTN, Airtel and Glo between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. until the end of February 2025. Labour also threatened that if the telecommunications companies fail to revert to the old tariff by the end of 2025, February this month, a total shutdown of their operations nationwide will commence from the 1st of March. Now, staying on the topic of tariffs, this time import tariffs, let's look at The Guardian. The Guardian has news that importers have diverted their cargoes to Togo, Ghana and Benin and other countries in order to avoid tariffs. Now, these charges imposed by multiple government agencies, terminal operators and shipping companies have increased by almost 100% in less than a month, raising cargo clearance above the reach of most operators. Now, this is coming amidst huge haulage costs. The Guardian article continues to say that Lagos ports are now reporting a record decline, a development which is making a mess of Nigeria's ease of doing business campaigns. Really interesting stuff on the Guardian's article there. Moving on to the Daily Trust, and it leads with this tax reform bill. Essentially, reps want contentious sections of the bill to be expunged and are seeking clarity on conflicts with constitutional provisions. Now, there's still some opposition on this inheritance tax issue, and in response to that, these reps are proposing a VAT reduction. The Punch this morning leads with Tinubu's re-election or attempts for his re-election. The ACF and others have tackled Abdullahi Ganduje over his comments about there being no vacancy at the most highest office in our country. So those are our papers from Nigeria. I do think that when we're looking at organized labor in this country, they do a good job of making some noise, declaring plans for a protest, plans for a total shutdown. But with this one, I do think they will be supported because many people are having and have had enough about tariffs and increased bills everywhere you turn. But I don't know how feasible it is for people to start these strict strike conditions of 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. not using your time. I don't know how that's going to work.
I think that organized labor needs to evolve to a point where they can make meaningful interventions. Yes, strikes are effective in some instances, boycotts are effective in some instances, but you have to be realistic. So you're telling me if I have a medical emergency at noon, I just need to hold on until, look at the state of the economy. So I have a sale that's supposed to go through. My client is calling me. You want me to ignore my call? It's not going to happen. Right. So meaningful interventions is, let's pull them. They have their workers, they have their people in each of these sectors. In the telco sector, they have people there. Why not bring those people forward and say, you know what, these are the realistic demands that we can make. This is how we can mediate so that there can be some sort of level playing field with regards to, the reality is that the cost of doing business, it's not a secret, there's no conspiracy around it, because there's now conversations around, some of these companies have been, removing Forex, sending Forex out illegally and so forth. There's a lot now thrown into the mix. Let's tackle issue by issue. If you're alleging that there's some sort of financial misconduct on the side of foreign exchange or from some of these telcos, let's face that one. For now, we are facing the tariffs. So with regards to the tariffs, what's the issue? These telcos are saying that they are highly dependent on imports.
Correct.
A lot of their costs are dollar-based. So why can you not meet the government and say, what are the interventions? Can we make some of these things duty-free?
Yeah.
What can we create? I know some of the internet service providers have actually started assembling some of the things they need to use, their modems and so forth locally. What can be made locally? So this is ultimately, yes, good to see organized labor trying to, trying to be assertive. But this is really a failure in government, because the telco sector is not a small chops sector that we can just ignore and say they're just small chops, they shouldn't increase their price. No, it affects everybody.
So I think they're barking up the wrong tree. And you just analyzed, in terms of what I was thinking in my head, that it's not about the telcos. They are not dealing with the fundamental issues, which is the cost of doing business in Nigeria. And it doesn't affect the telcos alone. how many boycotts are they going to have? Because whether they like it or not, prices are going to go higher, not just in the telecom industry, but in other parts. And we've seen it play out. Are you going to go to the supermarket and boycott them for increasing their prices? Are you going to go to restaurants and boycott them for increasing their prices? Let them deal with the federal government or the government or this administration for the way in which things have happened in the economy, such that it has made it even more difficult to run businesses here. And like so instead of them, all the conversations we've had with regards to going to lobby the government, speak to them, that's where they should focus their energy on. It's not even just about emergencies. Nigeria is an economy run by a lot of small businesses who depend on their telephones to do business. Tell the man, like you said, that he should not pick up his call between 11 and 2 p.m. It's just ridiculous. And finally, let me just say, I saw something online. I'll just read that just very quickly because it's, talking about how a lot of things have gone up and tariff hike. MTN has hiked, telecoms talked about that. Customs added extra 4% admin charges on FOB. Yes. We talked about that with the Guardian. The Nigerian Ports Authority increased port charges by a whopping 15% as well. The CBN is set to introduce new charges. It is just increasing. Let them boycott all of it. Deal with the fundamental issue. The government who's putting out policies that are, injurious to our industries.
Thank you.
The Nigerian Labour Congress, to me, is a big joke. They've never gotten it right in terms of, real intellectual analysis of most of the issues. They balk the wrong trend. They fight the wrong things. These were the same people that when they were fighting for minimum wage, we told them that their fight, yes, good, valid, but the amount they were calling was unrealistic. In the end, common sense prevailed. This was when they were I remember when they were fighting President Tinubu as regards to fix the refinery and the state of the economy and all of that. They fizzled out at some point in time. Like you said rightly, the real thing is the cost of living, which if you have a protest on inflation now, yes, that's the right protest, but they keep bucking the wrong trend. I'm sure Mr. Ajero himself, his phone will be on between 10 to 12 noon. 11 to 12
to 2 p.m.
His phone will be on all that time. He's not going to leave his phone.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Shall we call him?
We can try and call him that time.
Do you think he's going to say
So, secondly, and I'm sure maybe he thinks that this is the time of NITEL and telephone exchange that we can spend the whole day looking for dialing tone. I remember those days in Odogbo, you say, is there dialing tone? Hello, is there dialing tone? I'm sorry, and I like to call on real labor leaders in this country and former labor leaders. We need a labor that is intellectual and is fit for purpose.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Adefemi. Honestly, just thinking of everything that's going on, and it's how do we get out of this? How do we create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive in Nigeria? But thank you so much.
Always
great to have you on the show.